public service of the NTA.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Platform. My name is Anthonia Amusu. Our guest is an engineer and information management professional with about 25 years experience. He has been involved in major engineering, asset and facilities management in Europe and some African countries. A graduate of civil engineering from the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, and a master's degree holder in building services engineering from Brunel University in the United Kingdom. So please join me as I welcome Mr. Chidi Umeano. You are most welcome to Platform.
Thank you very much, Antonia, for welcoming me to this platform. I think it's a privilege to be here. Thank you.
Glad to have you. So on set with me, I have Deji.
Yeah, my pleasure to be with you.
And then Bayo, Ogori.
My pleasure to be here.
Okay. Mr. Umeano, like I introduced you, you are an asset management consultant. In this climb, we are more conversant with when we talk of facility management. Now we are hearing of asset and facility. Can you just please quickly educate us on when you talk of asset and facility management, what are we talking about?
I think I'll start off by talking about what is very familiar with a lot of people, facilities management. So facilities management is about looking after your facilities in terms of operations. So there are two aspects to facilities management. You look at hardware, which is the hard services, and the soft services. The hard services deal with physical items like air conditioning, generators, lifts. The soft services deal with things, the human aspects of people, the reception, security, landscaping, and all those areas are under the soft services of facilities management. Now, facilities management is not the whole picture. Asset management is the whole picture. The whole picture of what? The whole picture of deciding I need an asset to fulfill the needs of the citizens. So I don't build a big stadium somewhere in Ota where there's nobody, or somewhere in Abakaliki where people grow rice. You make decisions. Why do I need an asset? When you make that decision, you decide, where am I going to source the items for this asset? How long is it going to take to build that asset? You make that decision, you then decide who is going to build the asset. How much is it going to cost to build the asset? Is that enough? No. How much is it going to cost to maintain this asset? What's the lifespan of this asset? Oh, is that enough? No. When that asset is finished, we have big assets that have been used and they are lying idle. How am I going to dispose of that asset? So asset management is the whole spectrum. From the time I decide I need an asset to the time the asset has fulfilled its lifespan. So I think that's a kind of a brief description.
Okay, it's interesting to hear you talk about lifespan of an asset. In this country or around here, it's like everything is always on forever. So is it that is this concept new that we have not been able to factor this aspect into our buildings, our structures and things we have been having around here?
In the developing countries, yes, it's new. In the developed countries, it's been around for the whole concept has been around for the past 35 years. Maintenance is not new in Nigeria. We've been maintaining assets. What asset management is all about is integrating different aspects of an organization. The legal, the HR, the finance, the engineers, all these, rather than working in silos, you're working in a holistic form. That's what asset management is about. An integration of all the different departments so that legal will say, we want to build an oil rig somewhere. What's the legal implication? So you're beginning to think of decisions. What's the risk to the community?
No, you know why I asked you this question of lifespan? I've never, I stand to be corrected, I've never seen any asset or any facility that somebody will say, oh, it has lived its lifespan, so let's discard it or dispose.
Now, and I think because unfortunately we run what I call a reactive regime in developing countries. Of course, Nigeria included in one of those developing countries. So in developed worlds, manufacturers, when they bring off assets to here, there's what's called a typical lifespan. So if I use a lift, which everybody is familiar with, a lift should last for about 25 years if properly maintained. Of course, school of thought would say, well, it depends on the usage, and that's correct. It depends on the usage and it depends on the condition. So we have situations whereby some assets have been brought in from overseas, and we used to use the word tokumbo cars. Those assets haven't fulfilled their lifespan, so that's why they can still bring them here, and we continue to use them. Now, the challenge we have in Nigeria is we use assets till they break down, and we go and buy a new one. The second thing is nobody likes to be associated with maintenance. So the focus is always about building new items. So in terms of lifespan, absolutely, every single asset has a lifespan. This table that is we're sitting here, the chair I'm sitting on, if you leave it here for another 50 years, it will disintegrate on its own.
Now let's come home there. Let's look at something like a road.
Okay.
And I think they say most roads still have a lifespan of
absolutely.
20 to 25
Absolutely.
years. So when it has lived up, it's used its lifespan, what is expected to happen to that?
Now, what happens is there are mechanisms and processes and procedures that can be put in place to ensure that an asset even outlives that lifespan, okay? Depending on the usage, obviously. So go back to roads. If you go to roads, you know, one day somebody was complaining in the UK that there's so much traffic. These guys are always building roads and repairing. And, you know, my dad was a road design engineer in Salford, Manchester. And I used to work in his firm when he came back to Nigeria as a road engineer. My project was on road. And when it comes to roads, what happens is you begin to monitor roads. And I can go through the whole typical process of an asset management of roads. But be that it may, look at a road, you say the lifespan is 25 years. There's also a design traffic load on that road. Now, when you look at a road and you say, 10 years, they begin to have potholes, that asset is not going to live up its lifespan. So what happens in developed country is they will chop it off completely, not just putting in a gray or pessimistic. I think everybody will agree that we have a massive problem looking at structures. We've seen a lot of buildings collapse for different reasons. Maintenance, we've seen lots of fire in building, and that's attributed to maintenance. There's some buildings I've walked into, and I know in the US and the UK, if those buildings were there, they will be shut down completely. There's no doubt without a doubt. I am not going to mention buildings here. That's not my purpose here. The purpose is to see what are we doing wrong and what can we do better. That's what we're here for. So in terms of maintenance, one of the things, and government has its own blame, the private sector has its own share of the blame.
What about the individuals utilizing any of this facility or the asset?
Come again, please.
I said, what about the individual? You said government, the private sector. What about the individual?
The individuals. So when I say private, I'm referring to the individuals, and I'll come into the different roles.
But let's start with the government.
The government. I'll start off with the government.
Yeah.
And you may help me here. I need a lot of assistance.
Yeah.
When was the last time you saw a public official commissioning a maintenance project?
That's a question.
That's
you want
a question.
an answer?
When was the last time? And I need an answer.
Yeah, well, we will not give you immediate answer right
Good.
now.
That's because it's hard to find. Now, maintenance is not glamorous. Maintenance doesn't bring the votes. Maintenance doesn't stay in history. We need, and I'm going to come with the media, why the media needs also to emphasize on the need for maintenance. Yeah. What's glamorous? Opening a new bridge, opening a new road. That's glamorous. Nobody wants to maintain what somebody else built. Yeah. We need to shift that mentality because we're not going to have money to build anymore. Let me give, please draw me back to this question, but I've just remembered something that brought me in line why I actually came into this this area of, because as I said, my background is civil engineering. I did road design after my first degree, and I went in to do building services, and I went in to do lots of programs on IT management. I met, while I was working for PricewaterhouseCoopers as a consultant in the UK for almost 3 years, I met an engineer who was involved in building the Apapa port. And he said he came to see the Apapa port in 1985. And he was shocked with what he saw. So this was in 2000, we were discussing this. Yeah, about 2000, roughly about 2000.
He was shocked or disappointed?
He was shocked and disappointed with the state of the ports. Okay. And I said, why? He said he was involved in the Apapa port, and when the Apapa port was built, it was one of the most equipped ports, not in Africa, in the world. That shook me. That shook me. One of the most equipped ports
In the world.
in the world. He said he went in 1985 and he was disappointed. Now in my heart, this was about 15 years after, I said, please don't go. I said it in my heart. Please don't go, you have a heart attack. Now, I'm talking about the ports, and we could go on and on with our schools. I went to University of Nigeria. I mean, let me go back to Ikulu Primary School in Enugu. There are no windows there in that school right now. Maintenance is glamorous. We need to, the United Kingdom celebrated last year, 2 years ago, 150 years of the underground running. Can you imagine trains running below where we are now? They celebrated 150 years of that. Man, that's beautiful. They celebrate maintenance.
Okay.
So we need to celebrate what other people build.
So do we need a policy framework?
Are you now saying that
No, wait,
what
that is
you're
an
saying-
issue. Is it the policy framework? Is it that?
Now, one of the things we've been talking about with the asset management is actually to put a framework and sign something into the bill. There's something Lagos State government has done recently. I was with some of the commissioners. And last year, Lagos State, for example, put a mandate that, and they've signed a bill for Office of the Facilities Management as an example. But remember, facilities management is just an aspect, a subset of asset management, because we need to ask ourselves, why do we even have these facilities in the first place? But be that as it may, we're having a step in the right direction. Now, every agency must bring out 2.5% of their capital budget and set it aside for the Office of the Facilities and Maintenance. That's very good. Actually, health and education has to bring out 5%. That's very good. So we're taking a step in the right direction. So that's good.
As far as
But wait,
funding
in the
is
sorry, Deji,
concerned,
sorry, in the advanced climb, like what percentage of the budget did they set aside for facilities?
I mean, they do allow between, depending on the organization, 2.5% to 15% of the budget for maintenance. Maintenance is very, very critical. I mean, you look at the hotels. When you go into a hotel in the UK or US or Dubai, and you come to Nigeria, the same brand, and you see that the level of service, the level of maintenance is absolutely different. I used to do a lot of work for Sheraton Hotels in Warsaw, and I actually single-handedly set up the engineering department. It was a brand new hotel in 1996, and one of the things I was there to do was to set up engineering, put a maintenance regime, and put in technology so that people don't have to remember. The technology sends them emails, sends them texts to say, look, that item is due for maintenance. So it's not about remembering.
Okay, so Deji, you've been wanting to ask me
yeah,
something, right?
the question is this. It's not glamorous in Nigeria to maintain what somebody else has done.
Yes.
And we have a challenge there because we have a lot of abandoned projects.
Correct.
Somebody will start something, another person will come in, put it aside and start it. So
Yes.
now, if you want to start sorting this out, but that's the main issue now, we want to start sorting ourselves out. Who will be the best way to start looking at this and start gradually putting things right?
Okay. I'll start small and I'll go big.
Okay.
I'll start with each of us. Okay? So, when I go back to my home, if I have a house or if I'm renting, look around and think, can I splash paint on my house just to make it look nice? And because you see, what paint does, for those that have a house, when you put paint on your structure, maybe every 2-3 years, it prevents ingress of insects, rain, sunshine going into the structure, and it preserves your structure. Now, to paint a property, a 4-bedroom house, for example, and I'm talking to landlords as well as tenants, would cost maybe between 50,000 naira to 100,000 naira, depending on how big it is. To paint the inside is even less. So the first thing I'll say, start off, if you see a toilet seat wobbling, do something about it. Go in and tighten it with your hand. It doesn't take anything. I mean, people say you have to call somebody. You don't have to call somebody to tighten a toilet seat. You can use your hand and tighten it. So we begin to look at ourselves. We begin to conscious. When we see a tap that is wobbling, tell somebody that this is wrong. Don't leave it. Do something about it. So that's the starting point, okay? I was in, and I'm happy to say this, I was in I mean, I've gone to a lot of airports. All the airports are the same, so there's no need of calling a name. And there was a tap running. It wasn't fixed. It couldn't close. So what they did was to put a container to connect that tap not running through to a gallon, a big container.
Oh, yeah.
So what happens is when it gets full, the water begins to spill on the floor. It overflows. So what does it take to change the tap? I asked somebody. They said maybe 200 naira to buy a new one. That's an international airport in this country. Oh no, this is not acceptable. It's not acceptable. Somebody should go and say, look, how much does it cost to do this? So individually, when we go home, when we go back home after this program, go back and look. Is there anything I can do? I see something, call the maintenance people and say, at least report it. Report it. Let's not leave things idling.
Wait,
that's a small one.
Okay.
So that's a small one, okay? So I'm going now to
a higher level.
To a higher level, okay? So what should happen? I think, let me go to the extreme, which is the government. The government should and must say, you know what? As part of a legislation, we have to have an asset management framework, okay? I know we have lots of it, but also not just to have the framework, to implement that framework through legislation. You know, in the Western world, there are lots of legislations that would send the CEO of organizations to jail. There's what's called Legionella disease.
If
Sick
that
building
CEO
syndrome.
refuses to follow that law.
Absolutely.
Okay.
They go to jail, especially when there's an accident. They go to jail. So that framework, implementation, legislation, enforcement, that would have consequences to people. So that when people are running the organizations, they will take safety of their employees into consideration, because the poor asset management, poor maintenance results to unsafe environments.
Okay, can I ask a question as a follow-up, please?
Yeah, go ahead.
Now, you just pointed a picture now from the small level,
Yes,
in the individuals,
correct.
to the extreme level,
Correct.
government. What's the link? Because individuals also make up the government.
Absolutely. So what you find is when people begin to awaken to this aspect that this shaking toilet seat is not right. From my house, when I go to the office and I see a shaking toilet seat, I will report it to my superior or to the help desk or to Savicom or whoever is responsible for maintaining that property. So that's the first step. Awareness. That's what we're trying to do, to bring that awareness into people so that people don't see things and walk past. And I have seen loads of it. And I watch people, they just walk past things that are not right.
But would it help if we include asset management and facility management in our curriculum, you know, starting from the cradle?
Thank you very much. And I think we actually, right now, speaking to University of Ibadan, one of the things we want to do is to begin to educate.
What about secondary schools?
Oh, secondary schools, absolutely. I'm talking even from primary school.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that we've lost, civics, we used to do civics when we were young. And you know, civics is about respect for human beings and for property. There's no respect for property. People look at government property, even property within NTA where we are, as if it belongs to some abstract. It belongs to you and I because we pay our taxes. So when people begin to have civic respect for people's property, we have respect. When we have respect for people's property, this whole mindset will change. So go back to civics. I was in a forum with a governor, and there's no need to mention, they came to the UK, and I said, we need to bring back civics into primary, secondary, tertiary, where people have respect for things. They don't look at government property as an abstract. It belongs to you and I. So yes, curriculum, and we read a lot, but it has to be practicalized. And that's why I talk about the home. If people begin to, so that when that child goes out of the home, it won't be, you don't have to force them to do things. There's a way, there are two things I call cohesion and conversion. So with my kids at home, for example, I have 5 children. When I tell them to go and dress their bed, automatically, when they wake up 6 o'clock in the morning, nobody reminds them. They go and dress their bed. You know why? I've told them, if they don't dress their bed, is that part of that maintenance? You could develop craw on your skin. So they now see a need. I don't go and flog them to tell them they have to do this. So automatically they know that if they don't dress their bed, they're going to have craw. So they've been doing that for the past 17 years. And that's the kind of things, cohesion or conversion. I go for conversion. Begin to change those kids'
Orientation.
reorientation from that civics, respect for people's property, respect for things. If you see something wrong, report it to somebody.
Yeah, on a larger scale now, how do we do that in the country
I mean,
like Nigeria?
I mean, in Nigeria, I mean, without a doubt, I still believe in those little steps at home. Then we begin to go into the school and begin to talk about maintenance. Without a doubt, maintenance should be a core module in engineering. It should be a core module. Architecture, look at architecture. People say, what has architecture got to do with that? Do you know, when I'm designing, there's a house I went into, and 4 of the bulbs were out. Why? The architect had designed it up there. For them to change those bulbs, they need a scaffold.
Exactly.
So we begin to think of the architect, maintenance in mind when you're designing. How am I going to maintain? Some things can't be done because they are out of reach to people.
I was going to ask you, talking about architecture, do we build, when we build, from your experience, you've
Yes.
traveled everywhere, almost everywhere.
Yes.
Do we build with our climatic conditions
In the past, no, but recently, yes, because there's a lot of globalization. A lot of architects are traveling. We had a lot of architects that came for one of our summits in London to understand about sustainability, looking into the future. And that's what sustainability is all about. How do I make sure that my assets will be available into the future for my children and my children's children? So now, yes, people are beginning to think about our climate condition, the hot weather. So when we build things, we no longer just go and buy things from the UK. We're looking at hot climates like Dubai. We look at hot climate like Texas. We go to Houston. A lot of Nigerians and architects go there for conferences. They bring in their materials and they bring them here. So those days are gone by.
But
now.
let's go back to the issue of this maintenance, because
Yes.
that's the crux of this conversation.
Yes.
Now, if we want to, you mentioned about awareness.
Okay.
You mentioned about conversion.
Yes.
Now, in the governmental level, what do you think Nigerian government can do to start this awareness and the awakening process?
I mean, everybody always says the first spot is to put in a legislative framework and a regulation. We have regulations here. For example, we have the building regulations that specifies what should be done and what shouldn't be done. But I think there should be an asset management that says, why am I actually building this in the first place, okay? I know we do feasibility studies and all that. Where am I going to get the materials to support these projects? Because one of the things that you find is where you have, and I'm coming back to refineries, for example, why some of our refineries are not working. It's because some of these materials, some of the equipment that were used to build these refineries were sourced from strange places like Turkey and Russia, without being, but even whether it's United Kingdom or US, you need to know where is my material going to come from in the event of maintenance. So government needs to put in certain legislatures saying, if you're going to do massive projects like this, what is the inventory strategy? What is the procurement strategy? What is the maintenance strategy? All these things have to be built into this framework so that we have what is called just-in-time delivery. When I need this part, I have to have it here. That's how manufacturing goes on. So government has to put in this framework, but most important, we have lots of these frameworks, we have lots of regulations, implementation, enforcement, and consequences for not enforcing those.
Okay, let's look at the role of the professionals themselves.
Good.
Would you say that the engineers who are supposed to advise either the client or the government,
Yes.
are they really doing their bit to ensure that when they, like you said, even before you commence the project, you have thought of everything all along the way? our engineers, are they putting this into practice?
You know, you cannot do what you don't know. You cannot teach. You cannot talk about something that you're not aware of. The engineers are doing the best within the confines they are in. So, for example, I know a lot of engineers, they do feasibility study to decide on whether a project should be done and things like that. They think about the community, what's the impact on the community. Because maintenance hasn't been brought into the forefront, unfortunately, during design, and I've seen a lot of projects, maintenance is not considered. You take an example, you want to change a light bulb, or you want to change something within the ceiling. All of a sudden, people are looking for where the access panel is to go on top of the ceiling. These are things that should be very, very obvious. These are things that should be, I mean, when I mean obvious, obvious to the occupants.
Stage of design.
At the stage of design, you have to think thoroughly. How are engineers, how will these assets be maintained? Maintenance, to tell you how strong this, maintenance within asset management is about 60% of the cost of the whole asset management process. Maintenance, which is, when I talk about maintenance, I'm talking about the operation of an asset. Maintenance is about 60% of the cost.
That's an ideal situation.
In an ideal situation, yes.
So what's the implication of this absence of maintenance on our economy?
Oh my goodness, you're just digging deep. I mean, the implication is massive, absolutely massive. We have situations where people are dying every minute. I'm not talking about hour, every minute on our roads due to lack of maintenance. The government has done a lot. It has improved, and I must say, you know, with the establishment of FEMA, which is the Federal Agency for Road Maintenance, the Federal Road Maintenance Agency, which is under the Ministry of Works. In our last summit, the Ministry of Works, they were there. They've introduced the Road Asset Management System, RAMS is called. And RAMS is about looking at every section of the road to have an asset tag, so that people, when they see a problem, a pothole, they can report it to the federal, to FEMA. So there's a lot being done, but the consequences of the total decay for the last 30 years is massive. People are dying every minute, and people say, oh gosh, that's exaggeration. We have about 170 million people. Say about 50% of them travel on our roads. I drove down from, I went to see the commissioner in Osun State, and I drove down from Abuja. Between Okene and Akure, which is about 1 hour, I decided to count the number of accidents, so cars that have squashed, and I counted about 16. 16, that's just, the consequence is massive. So let's leave the roads. Look at, what are we doing here? We're paying so much on oil and petrol. That's because we only have about, as of last year, 21% of our refinery working. Less than that, if that. So that's on the economic side. We have a situation whereby, don't quote me exactly, if I could look on my days, we are spending about $300 million every month in India on healthcare. Why? Because our teaching hospitals are not working.
Or we don't have the personnel.
We don't have, the equipment haven't been maintained for the past 13 years.
Not that they're not there.
Oh, they are there. We buy top notch. We have the money. We can buy. But can we sustain it into the future? I'm thinking there was a recent thing, and it's in my mind, but I'm going to remember it. You look at some of the airports. They'll tell you they've rebuilt it, which is good. They look nice. The airport has transformed in the last few years. But can that be sustained into the future? Is the question. Without maintenance. So what are the consequences of those maintenance? We have unsafe roads. We have people spending the country spending, private individuals spending $300 million going outside the country to study. Look at the infrastructure of our schools. Look at the infrastructure. You go to any school, I now call University of Nigeria, that's where I went to. Some places there are no windows. The toilets are not functioning. So what happens? We're now taking money from here, we're investing it in other countries. So economically, we're suffering.
But let's look at this way, because you just mentioned tertiary institutions now. Let's take a university, for instance. They have different faculties. There's the Faculty of Engineering, you do mechanical, you do civil, you do electrical,
Correct?
and you go to that campus and you see photos.
Yes.
Now, is it not possible as part of educational curriculum to even encourage students in those schools to start using the skill, the knowledge they gather in the school to fix those problems and they get marks for it?
Now, one thing is, if something is not somebody's responsibility, it becomes nobody's responsibility. There is a need to create an asset management area that is totally focused. Not somebody who is a civil engineer doing something design. After a while, say, oh, let me just go back to maintenance. They have to be people that will be engaging those people, totally focused. And hence, when the Lagos State government created the Office of the Facilities Management and Maintenance, they knew what they were doing. They knew, the governor of Fashola knew that there is a need to focus on this aspect, maintenance. We can't continue like this. There must be a focused effort to deal with this issue.
Yeah, let's talk again, come back to personnel. Like you have said, maintenance is not glamorous.
Yes.
And there's always, even at the minutest level, people are always, Nigerians are complaining of inadequate, skilled manpower
Yes.
to engage, that you can engage for maintenance.
Correct.
So when those people are not there, not to
Yes.
talk of the bigger projects and larger,
Yeah.
how can we start filling that gap? Where do we start from? How do we start getting the required skilled personnel to engage in this maintenance? Because it's not, I don't want to believe that it's those who constructed that are expected to come back to do the maintenance.
Not necessarily, but I mean, I'll come to that. Please hang on to that question.
Yeah.
Should those that construct also maintain? Please hang on to that question. I'll come back to your thing about the skill set.
Yeah.
In 2011, one of the reasons why we came into Nigeria in 2011 was to look at that question you talked about in terms of skill set. So we began to run training and all that. But the issue, like you rightly pointed, is absolutely massive. And like you said, I think there's a need to begin to inculcate this at even a much lower level from primary school, very, very small. You're not going to teach them on this, but you're going to tell them that show them that, is this right? To see a wobbling toilet handle is not right. Report it. I think training is very, 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 and I mean, there's a company called
at a younger level, at early stages.
Early stages, begin to teach them. Kids, how you teach them 1, 2, 3. You teach them on all these little things. Then you come to the secondary school. I think a need for people to begin to think about maintenance. So that by secondary school, they start thinking about maintenance as a module. There's nothing wrong with it. Yes, you're doing science, and say, yeah, maintenance or asset management as a module. Even if it's 1 hour a month, it begins to ring in their bell. And all of a sudden, asset management and maintenance, oh, I want to go and do that course in a university.
Do we have that in Nigerian universities?
Now, currently, we have facilities management, but not asset management as a whole spectrum. And no, we don't have it. The Institute of Asset Management, one of our partners, they're actually going to be coming down for our program. They detect what should happen in terms of asset management. So there's actually an ISO, so an International Standard Organization framework called ISO 55000, which puts a framework for big organizations. So when you go to developed countries, you see massive power countries. That's why there's power constantly in all these places. That's why there's constant water, because they have to follow through and show compliance and show that they've actually done A, B, C, D, E to Z in terms of asset management. So at the moment, no, but it's coming in gradually. I mean, we're hoping to engage universities.
Yeah, Mr. Mana, you were talking about the issue of skills, and then the fact that those who construct buildings must be the one to maintain those structures or those assets.
Now, it depends on the scale of the infrastructure. I'll give you an example. The Eco Atlantic City, which is being built by can't remember the name of the company. But anyway, I asked the managing director, what is the plan for Eco Atlantic City? Because I don't want to see another dolphin there. Yeah? And he said there's a 75-year plan to maintain the place. And I said, that's very good. Now, they are constructing, and they've actually signed a 75-year plan to actually also manage and maintain the building. So going back to your question, it tends to depend on the project. The reason why it's good to have those that construct, to engage them in the maintenance is, if they've put in inferior materials, they would suffer the consequences of the inferior materials they've used for the construction. So
But what would be the implication of that on we
On the
either,
users,
well, for us Nigeria, either acquiring the skills like I have asked before?
Well,
if those will be able to come back again to maintain, then how we're talking of shortage of jobs
this is
and things like
now
that.
this is where, if we assume that those guys, these people that are building are coming from overseas, let's assume they've come from overseas, we can put in a structure in place to ensure to be a transfer of employee skills to local content. I mean, the local content is working pretty well within the oil and gas industry, where there's a lot of local activity. And I believe there's a local thing being championed within the power sector. If we can get the people that built, as part of the contract, they have to ensure whether it's 75%, whatever we decide, transfer of skills. So for example, any job that is going to take less than 1 week to do, as an example, in terms of time, should be able to be done by local expertise. We can tie that into a contract. We can tie into a contract of perform. If you don't perform, you don't get paid. I mean, there are lots of contracts like that overseas. Okay?
But then, you want to ask a question?
Yes, I have a question. What's your take on concession vis-a-vis asset management?
I mean, concession is always two sides. It's like a sword. It's a two-edged sword. In our environment, because of unfortunately, I mean, government is beginning to pick up and take on responsibilities. But in the past, concession would have been, without a doubt, I would have said absolutely go for concession because government has failed. But recently, government is doing very well. There are lots of things the government has been doing, but there are areas the government should stay away and allow those who are experts in it to actually run it. So there are lots of positive for
Which
concessions.
areas are you looking at?
I mean, if you look at, where the government has actually,
No, where they should stay away from.
Stay away.
where they should stay away.
Yeah.
I mean, very high-profile projects, very, very high-profile projects. So if I talk about, the refinery, for example, where we have we need very high capacity in terms of skill sets. We look at power, and there's a lot of positive step that's been taken in power. We've now privatized most of the power sector. We look at telecoms, which has been totally privatized. Yes, we're not getting the connection we need in terms of we're getting lots of dropped calls. But when it started, remember when it started, we didn't have lots of drop calls. It's because we now have lots of subscribers, the number of masts there. And so those special areas, government can oversee to make sure that the consumers, we citizens, are getting a fair deal. Because what you find is, and it's happening within the telecoms, and really those telecoms guys should be fined, they should be prosecuted, because I keep getting drop calls and my money keeps. So that's where the government needs to get involved. Enforce laws, make sure that if these guys are not, I mean, somebody asked me, do we have drop calls in Western countries? Can you imagine? We don't even have dropped lights. I've been in the UK for about 20 years, going back and forth in the UK for 20 years. And light has been taken twice for about 2 minutes.
Yeah, but then the question,
2 minutes,
the
yes.
question I want to ask is this, because if you look at what is going on in Nigeria now and what is happening in other climes,
Yes.
what is the responsibility of citizens? Because we heard the Minister of Power lamenting that the incidences of sabotage, blowing of gas pipelines is affecting our power industry negatively.
And he's right.
Yeah, the point now is that what is the attitude that will promote sustainable development? in
Good.
Nigeria?
I like that word, sustainable development. And I think I'm going to go back again very quickly.
Yeah.
Civics.
Yeah.
Respect for people's property. Be honest. Now, we have a situation in an estate where people go and tap the NEPA line directly. And what they do is all their air conditioning, big equipment is connected directly to the NEPA or PHCN or TCN line. That's number one. And they then pay, and the lights are the one that they're paying for. So every month they pay 200 naira or 300 naira as their bill. Meanwhile, they are taking directly. They're not paying about 2,000-3,000 naira. So citizens have to be honest. I mean, you can't do anything about it, but this is step one. Go back to the civics. When people begin respect for government property, because if I take and I'm not paying for my power here, somebody else is going to suffer for it.
So is there a link between the environment and asset management?
There is a big link between the environment and asset management. There was a question earlier on. Let me give you an example. There was an incidence of pre-metered pre-meters, you know, the meters.
That's the
Pay meters.
Prepaid.
Prepaid
meters.
meters.
Yeah.
Prepaid meters for the power sector was imported into Nigeria, somewhere in the north. And when they started installing the meters, all of a sudden, the wires began to melt. And they had spent almost $1.2 billion on these prepaid meters. So yes, there is a massive correlation. You look at our pipes, if you don't get the right pipes for water, you begin to get lots of corrosion from the salts in our water. So all these things have to be considered. The environment absolutely has a lot to play with asset management. And hence, when you're thinking about asset management, you think about legal, you think about HR, you think about the environment, you think about so many things. And that's why asset management is referred to as the integrated aspects of an organization, is to integrate all those organizations. I want to leave you with a quote by Rod Smith from the Energy Australia. This is what he says, and this is what is going to happen to us here. In 2000, so this is about 15 years ago, we realized we're heading for a potential death spiral in our maintenance. A point where virtually all our operational resources would be expended on current breakdown, with little or no planned inspection work. We had to refocus. We had to think of planned maintenance approach very quickly, or we would pay a significant cost in network reliability and senior management embarrassment. Staff safety was another major concern. As we were aware, there is always a risk that staff could be present during an asset failure. In order to solve this problem, there were two different drivers which needed to be addressed: the technical issues and the cultural paradigm shifts. Cultural paradigm shift. We need to shift the paradigm of our people. We cannot keep seeing that broken toilet seat and think it's okay.
This code, is it applicable to Nigeria?
Absolutely.
Okay, at the policy level, because that's all it comes down to the policy level. Now, where we are, we know. Where we need to be is what we're talking about.
Correct.
Now, what are the critical steps government needs to take now to move from where we are now to where we want to be?
And I like the phrase critical steps, because it's critical. We're in a situation whereby there is no light. People are their own government. You build your own borehole, you generate your own electricity. Some people have transformers in their homes. You are now building our own roads. So yes, critical step. What does the government have to do? The first step is to recognize there is a massive issue here in terms of maintenance. And then begin to put immediately a bill in place that focuses on asset management and maintenance. A bill that puts a fine, at least a consequence of fine. What is the government, you know?
What now imprisonment?
Sorry?
What now imprisonment will be?
I'm starting off as a graduate, baby steps.
Sanctions.
Sanction, let's say sanction. When people begin to see, if a government agency, for example, is fined because, you know, people don't have water or light, whatever it is, consequence of fine, and what they call public embarrassment. Public embarrassment.
They say that's an infringement on their human rights.
Absolutely. Public embarrassment. There was a judge in America. He doesn't send people to jail. What he does is when you're caught that you stole, they will hang something around your neck.
But
I am a thief. And you'll be walking around your own community. The rate of crime just dropped within 2 months because of the embarrassment. It wasn't about going to prison and getting locked and playing table tennis inside the prison. It's about a public embarrassment. So, consequence of fine, okay? and then the embarrassment. And of course, begin to see maintenance as go and maintain other people's projects. Yes, ex-governor built this road, but this government has now maintained it for that so that it becomes sustainable for the next 20 years.
But then, let's look at one issue that we're not talking about, our grassroots, our local government. Because when you look at living from Nigerian experience, right from the primary schools to the primary health centers, to the primary things that are closer to the people, local governments are responsible legitimately. But we pay so much attention on the federal government and the state government. Now, if you want to look at the local level now, what can people do within the local environment to make sure that those who are in government there do the right thing in terms of maintenance of the assets at the local government level?
And I think, I mean, rightly so, they say that we have to lead by example. And I think that's why a lot of focus is on the federal government. But on the local level, I think there has to be a way. I think there's always been problems of funds, and I think somebody mentioned this earlier on, funds. I believe that the local government should be given more power because those local government chairmen and the people, they go through the same road. And they can easily go and knock on the local government chairman's house and say, look, they've given you money, what's happening to our road? So there has to be, just like on the federal level and what the government of Lagos State has done, and Enugu State, I can mention that, Akwa Ibom, they've also done that there, whereby there is a focus on a team that manages and maintains not just roads, water pipes that are burst. You go around, you see leaking water pipes all over Lagos even. Water pipes. So there has to be a focus even on that local government level. But the beauty about local government is, I know where the local government chairman lives. If the local government chairman has built their own road and neglected other people, people can go and exercise their human rights of protest. We should not keep taking up and stomaching all this. So human beings, each individual, should be able to go and say, look, knock on the door, write a letter and say, look, Mr. Chairman, look at our roads. Until people start writing, nothing is going to happen.
But would it help if we have, like an inspectorate division in place?
Oh my goodness, you're touching something very, very important. 30 years ago, talking about cleanliness of environment, people used to inspect people's homes. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
They will come in and inspect your gutter.
They sanitary inspection.
Sanitary inspection, exactly.
Yeah.
Does that happen today? It doesn't. So maybe there's a need to reintroduce inspection agencies that would go and run. I mean, the FEMA is doing a good job. Whether it's doing enough is another thing. But wherever they are, I've seen them do lots of good things. I was impressed with the road. The Minister for Works, I must say, I've been driving on roads from Port Harcourt. I've driven to Lagos. I've driven Lokoja. I've driven it. I've driven to Cameroon, from Enugu to Mubi to Cameroon. I've driven on roads in Nigeria, Niger State, and the roads have been transformed. And I have to give it to, and I was even on the Ibadan road, I saw it's been dualized now, and hopefully. So, yes, they are doing this, but I still feel that maybe they don't have enough capacity to deal with these issues. Hence, there's a need to open smaller units that are focused in these local government areas.
Talking about roads, what do you think if we introduce toll gates on our roads for maintenance?
Toll gates, and I think I mentioned something. I don't want to get political here, but I said whoever removes the toll gate on Loki, because I keep passing that bridge. I stay in Parkview and I keep passing that bridge. So every time I want to go for lunch, I have to pay 600 naira just to have lunch at home. And I said, even the governor that will remove the toll gate, I will vote for them. It doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do. Toll has its place to play if the money is being used correctly. In the Western countries, I mean, I drove from Connecticut to Boston, and which is a 4-hour drive, and I saw two tolls there. So if used in the right way, if the money is used properly, but the thing is, the government has a responsibility to the citizens. because we are still growing, I still feel that introduction of toll is still a bit early. That's my.
Well, for maintenance, because government, funding is a problem. So
before you decide to build a road, that's what asset management is about. You must decide how the maintenance is going to be carried out. If you don't have enough money for maintenance, you cannot bank on citizens to pay for that road. So you have to have money already set aside for maintenance, even if it's just for 2, 3, 4 years. Then you gradually begin to introduce tokens of toll. Okay? You cannot bank on people. People can go on riot. The Lekki toll bridge was closed for months. So can you imagine if you are depending on that for maintenance? That means the road won't be maintained. It was closed. People said no, we're not going to pay for this. So yes, toll has its own place, but I think when you're building, and that's what asset management is all about, you decide, do I have money to build this road to maintain this road for the next 5 years, irrespective of any toll? Does that make sense? Do I have enough money to maintain this road? Then gradually you can begin to introduce tokens of toll to begin to gauge how people think. If, for example, on those toll gates, people were being charged 20 naira, nobody will raise an eyebrow. That's because you already have some money for maintenance for 2 years. So 20 naira, next year you make it 40 naira or 30 naira. That's nothing. And then gradually you begin to build it.
So are you saying that before any project is embarked upon, of course they will require maintenance.
Absolutely.
If the money for the maintenance is not set aside,
you shouldn't start off.
You should not.
No.
So then how do you now meet, like he said, the developmental needs of the citizens of the country? Because you are yearning, there's so many things that need.
You see, and this is the situation we have now. We have built gigantic projects that are absolutely idle. Let me give you an example. I've been talking about water and power and other roads. Let me go to agriculture. Do you know what a silo is? Silos are big grains to store grains. So if you go across the countries, you see massive things. Some of these cost 1.52 billion naira to build. Most of them are idle.
Why?
Lack of maintenance, lack of use. They've not been thought about.
Okay.
That asset management hasn't been taken into consideration. So absolutely 100%, if there is no money for maintenance is 60% of that life cycle. If there is no money for maintenance, do not embark on that project. That's a categorical statement.
But then if you
Yeah,
look at
we are
the
running
project,
out of time,
if you look at
Deji.
the
I
project
guess
list,
maybe we have to. That is a strong message you are really sending out to government, to
Absolutely.
everybody outside
And private
there.
sector.
And private sector. If you don't have 60% of the capital for maintenance,
No. So between 2.5% and 12 and 15% and 15% is the money you should have set aside for your maintenance. But what I'm saying is that the maintenance spectrum is 60% of the whole asset management spectrum.
Okay, so if you don't have that 2.5% about, well,
So
that's really a
about
tough one.
15%.
Then now, I don't know. That's
What
really
you
a
then
very
do
tough one.
is, if I'm going to build a road of 30 kilometers, build 20 kilometers and have money for maintenance so that that road is used properly, people enjoy it. Services are for citizens to enjoy, not to moan about after 2 years.
So on that note, really very something to really take away. That I hope those out there who need to do something about this are really listening. 2.5 to 15% must be set aside for maintenance. Otherwise, we will rethink about that project. On that note, we want to thank you very much, Mr. Chidi Umeano, for the time spent with us on platform. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for inviting me to platform. It's been a real pleasure to speak to you
No, it's a
and the
pleasure to
audience.
have
Thank you very
so
much.
Deji and Bayo, thank you for being on the set again.
Always
My
my
pleasure.
pleasure. Always my pleasure.
And we want to thank you again, those of you who have watched this program. We hope that next time will come your way. You'll be there for us, and of course, give a thought to what Mr. Umeano has said. Thank you for watching.